This is Future Radio.
Now, the Broads are one of the cornerstones of our county, a popular tourist destination, giving thousands of people the perfect place to get away all year round, with stunning scenery and endless possibilities. And the Broad Society plans to preserve these unique landscapes, ensuring future generations grow to love and admire the Broads like so many of us do now. And I'm delighted to say that the chair of the Broad Society, Mark Collins, joins me now to tell us more about the group. Good morning, Mark.
Morning, Sarah.
Thank you for joining me this morning. Looking lovely and bright out there today.
Yeah, it's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. So, where did your love for the Broads begin? How did it come about?
Well, I think probably as a boy we used to holiday here with my family, but over the years I didn't get so much opportunity to get up here. But on retirement, it was always my ambition to spend a lot more time on up in the Broads, and that's what I'm doing. Not thousands of people visiting the Broads, by the way. It's between 7 and 8 million people visit the Broads. I guess I'm just one of those. I'm not really locally grown here, but I really love it.
That's incredible amount of visitors.
Yeah.
And obviously they're so expansive. There's so much to see and enjoy on the Broads as well. So it's really something for everyone. I remember as a child coming here for boating holidays and just loving being out on the water.
Yeah, well, the Broads, I mean, in the Broad Society, the thing that our members, they just love the Broads.
Yeah.
That's really why they join the Broad Society. What do they love about it? Well, they love recreation, as you're touching on there. Boating, we've got 12,500 boats on the Broads. That's not including all the kayaks and paddleboards and all the rest of it these days, and nor all the people who come here to cycle or walk or birdwatch or take photographs. So it's great for recreation, and that's something that we in the Broad Society are keen on ensuring that continues successfully. But also, you know, the Broads is Britain's most important wetland. I think this is really something, it's on our doorstep. We don't always think of it like that, but it is the most important wetland from all sorts of points of view. We've got, you know, there are about 70,000 species of animals and plants in Britain. We've got 17% of them right here in the Broads. It's a huge proportion of Britain's total. So the environment is quite amazing. But we've also got 25% of Britain's threatened species. So that's something we've got to worry about a bit. But we all love the vistas, don't we? We love looking across those reed beds. It's amazing. Those big skies. That's what we love. That's what we love the Broads for.
Absolutely beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah.
Being on the water, and the peace and the just tranquility of the Broads as well, but also the kind of hustle and bustle in the more popular, busier places as well. I love the contrast between both of those.
Yeah, that's right. And a lot of the people who come to Wroxham and places like that, they also love the heritage of the Broads. This, you know, it is about people as well. You're absolutely right. The heritage is so amazing. The Broads are to a very large extent man-made, made by human beings back in the Middle Ages who dug out these Broads to get peat for their home fires. You know, and we only discovered that back in the 1950s, 60s. It's an extraordinary place, and the windmills. There's nowhere else like it in Britain. It's a recreation, environment, heritage. We've got everything here.
Isn't it incredible to think that that's how it came about as well? And, you know, that's such an important part of our history here in Norfolk. So the Broad Society obviously aim to preserve the landscapes of the Broads. What kind of issues and concerns are the society members facing? Yeah,
there are quite a few issues. The biggest one probably nowadays is climate change, climate warming, which in our part of the world involves problems with sea level rise. The sea levels have come up, you know, 4 to 6 inches, you know, in a very few years, and this is affecting the rivers a lot because the higher sea levels block the rivers in. You know, the tide. The Broads are all tidal, of course, so you've got the tide stopping the river flowing out twice a day, and that's causing difficulties when the sea is so relatively high, and of course Norfolk is very flat. That goes without saying. So there are difficulties with rising water levels that's affecting things like, for instance, access to the Broads under the bridges. So at Potter Heigham Bridge, for instance, the water levels there are at least so probably 6 inches, often more, higher than they have been in the recent past. So some of the larger boats can't get there. We need to think about, you know, maybe a new future for the Upper Thurn River, which is just the other side of Potter Heigham Bridge, and these are problems also affecting nature and wildlife. Not always in a bad way, but for instance, the swallowtail butterfly is a good example, which depends on milk parsley, a plant that grows in the reed beds. But if salt water comes up into the rivers from these higher seas, then the milk parsley can't grow. And there's only 16 breeding sites for the swallowtail left. If they get affected by salt water, we'll lose Britain's biggest butterfly and surely the icon of Norfolk that we all would recognise if it came through our garden. But some other species actually can do quite well. So, for instance, we're used to having just the one heron in Britain not so long ago, the grey heron. But now with climate change, we're looking at possibly having up to 9 species of heron breeding in and around the Norfolk Broads. A lot of them coming in from Europe where wetlands are tending to dry up. And dragonflies are doing well as well. So it's not always bad news, but to keep the environment as more or less as it is, with the sort of wildlife that we know and love and the recreation, the boating and so on that we know and love, that's going to be a big job because we're quite vulnerable to sea level rise, and the sea's a very powerful thing.
And I know it might not be a question that has sort of an immediate answer, but what kind of things are the Broad Society working towards or campaigning for to stop these changes? Obviously, like you say, some of them are good, but some of them are going to see a decline in species that are native to the Broads. So how do we balance that?
Yeah, well, it's a good question, and it's a big question, of course. But you're right, we are a campaigning organisation, the Broad Society. We like to think of ourselves as the voice for the Broads, as something we aim to give all our members a voice and a say in what the future might look like. So one thing to say straight away is if you look at a sort of a heat map of Britain and where the cost of dealing with climate change is going to be greatest, one of the most costly places to fix this is going to be East Anglia, particularly the northeast coast where the Broads are situated. It's going to cost a lot of money to build up the sea defences and make sure that we don't have massive floods coming into North Norfolk as has been the case in decades past. That needs to be avoided. But the funding for that is not easy to identify, and we need to keep the pressure up on government to make sure that wetlands and our rivers and indeed our canal systems and so on, all of these are suffering with less money available from government. That needs to be reversed. So we do campaign. We had a rally at Acle Bridge about funding the future of the Broads, and the Broads Authority itself, which manages the Broads, its own budget is far too small for the job in hand. And it's been sort of frozen for quite some years. So we need to find new ways of dealing with that and getting more money available. That's terribly important. There are other things that we campaign on that are more sort of actionable immediately by us. For example, with climate warming, we're seeing far more woodland encroaching on the rivers. So some of the reed beds, with climate warming, they turn into what we call car woodland. This is a type of wet woodland, and then into dry woodland. Well, we don't want woodland right up to the riverbanks in the Broads. You can't see beyond the trees. Yeah. You can't sail because the wind gets stopped. And frankly, woodland in the Broads is not one of our priority ecosystems. Woodlands are important lots of other places, of course, no question. But we need our reed beds and so on. These are some of the priority places. So we need to see more effort being put into managing encroaching woodland by landowners of different kinds.
So about keeping that funding at the forefront of people's minds, at the forefront of the people that can offer the funding's minds, government and things like that. And also starting outside the Broads, so with sea defences to stop that kind of encroaching on the Broads.
Yeah, the Environment Agency, for example, is responsible for that. Yeah. But the Environment Agency is another government department that's suffered huge cutbacks in funding. Now, we definitely do not want to see breaches in the sea wall in north and northeast Norfolk. That would be a major disaster in many different ways. So we do need funding and plans to deal with that. We have got a big multi-agency organisation, Broadland Futures Initiative, which is looking into these problems, looking into and predicting what the situation is going to be over the next 50 years. They need to report to us what on earth, what is going to happen, and what are the different options for doing something about it, so that civil society, communities like the one that you serve here in Norwich and wider Norfolk, can actually get involved and help. What is it we can do on these sort of big issues?
Yeah, what are these actionable things that we can do? Yeah. Who do we need to be campaigning to? How can we get our voice out there to protect this fantastic environment? And if someone listening is interested in joining the Broad Society and they've got opinions on the cause, they want to help with your rallies, where would they go? How do they go about doing that?
The best thing is to look at our website. We've got a brand new website, actually, which started earlier this year. And on there, you'll find all the information you need about how to join up. It's very, very straightforward. You'll also find a lot of stuff on there. We do a series of, we call them blogs. They're a bit more than what most people might consider a blog, a bit longer perhaps, and they're a bit more in depth. We put a lot of store by being scientifically accurate and getting our facts right, verifying things. We're not just arm waving and letting stuff go out there on the airwaves if we haven't made sure it's correct. But our blogs are very informative, and we organise meetings as well. This winter we've got a series of what we're calling society suppers up in Potter Heigham, where once a month we're going to have a light supper and then a debate that everybody can speak at and have a sort of what sometimes we might call a town hall meeting of the sort. And that's going to be on flooding. It's going to be on paying for the Broads, some of the things we've touched on here. It's going to be about planning. This is, a lot of people concerned about planning issues on the Broads, and tourism as well. These are the sort of subjects we want to tackle and let the voices of people be heard and send information on what they're saying to the authorities and so on, as well as getting on with things ourselves.
They sound like really interesting events and a fantastic opportunity for people, like you say, to have their say, get their voices heard. And it's so great when communities come together as well, because you hear so many different ideas, things you may never have thought of, things that you can take forward as well. So that was Mark Collins, the chair of the Broad Society, discussing what the group do as well as their upcoming events. Mark, thank you so much for joining me this morning. It was really interesting to talk with you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
You can find out more about the group by heading to their website, www.broads-society.org.
The sound of Norwich.
This is Future Radio.